What if everything we were told about heaven was never a poetic metaphor? What if the golden gates, rivers of fire, radiant thrones, and many-eyed beings were not the product of religious ecstasy from ancient prophets? Imagine a man from the Bronze Age whose mind was shaped by primitive farming and nomadic life. Imagine that he is suddenly placed inside an orbital station, a colossal interstellar ship, or a multidimensional construct existing outside our understanding of space and time. How would he describe neon lighting or plasma reactors? As living, unfading light? How would he name anti-gravity drives or gyroscopic rings? As wheels full of eyes, spinning inside other wheels. For many thousands of years, humanity has read ancient mystical texts exclusively as fairy tales, allegories, or moral lessons. But today we are changing the very paradigm. We are no longer looking for spiritual revelations in these lines. We are beginning to look for technical logs, ship journals, and encrypted evidence of physical contact with higher technologies. And the main, most detailed of such observation diaries is the Book of Enoch. This text is so shockingly precise, so overloaded with physical, astronomical, and architectural details that early church hierarchs hurried to strike it from the official biblical canon. They hid it, reclassified it as apocrypha because the world described there was too mechanical, too engineering-oriented to fit pure theology. For millennia, the text was considered almost lost until, in 1947, ancient scrolls confirming its authenticity were found in the Qumran caves. Enoch, the seventh patriarch from Adam, did not simply pray, he was taken. He observed, he recorded. And to decipher his notes, the human mind burdened by cultural prejudices is no longer enough. That is why we initiated Protocol Apocrypha. We uploaded the full corpus of the Book of Enoch texts, translations from the ancient Guizi language, Aramaic fragments, and Greek copies, into our analytical system, the super-powerful artificial intelligence Logos 7. The system's task was not theological interpretation. The task was strictly technical. To conduct a semantic disassembly of the text, filter out religious awe, remove epithets tied to divine fear, and extract the pure, raw information. The system was instructed to treat the Book of Enoch as the report of a crashed astronaut or a researcher trying to describe quantum physics in the language of a shepherd. And what Logos 7 produced after the very first data run forces us to rethink the entire history of humanity. The first thing the Logos 7 system pointed out was the anomalous structural quality of the text. Linguistic analysis algorithms revealed that Enoch does not write like a prophet in a trance. His syntax, his manner of presentation, is methodical protocoling. The system translated his terminology into modern scientific language. When Enoch speaks of the firmament, the artificial intelligence identifies it with 98% probability as a force barrier or protective dome. When the text describes chariots, Logos 7 classifies them as transport modules. The angels giving Enoch the tour become, in the system's analysis, operators, guides, or system administrators of the complex who strictly follow their security protocols, showing the observer only those sectors to which he has clearance. But the most shocking discovery of the first stage was the Book of the Heavenly Luminaries, a special section in Enoch's records. We uploaded this astronomical data into Logos 7, expecting to see primitive Bronze Age cosmology where the Earth is flat and stars are nailed to the heavenly vault. The system instead visualized an incredibly complex, mathematically precise celestial mechanics. Enoch describes with maniacal precision the portals or gates through which the sun and moon rise and set. He speaks of 6 eastern and 6 western gates. He meticulously records how the luminaries move from one gate to another throughout the year, changing the length of day and night. The simulation performed by Logos 7 shows that these gates perfectly correspond to the changing azimuth of sunrise and sunset throughout the solar year. But where did an ancient nomad get such data? Enoch states that the year consists of exactly 364 days. Modern historians laugh at this, pointing out an error of 1¼ days compared to our current calendar. However, Logos 7 does not rush to conclusions. The system conducted an astrophysical retroanalysis and put forward 2 startling hypotheses. First, Enoch describes the orbital cycle of Earth before some global cataclysm that could have slightly altered the planet's axial tilt and rotation speed. The second hypothesis, even more terrifying, Enoch describes the calendar not of Earth, but of synchronized time inside an artificial environment where the year is mathematically perfectly divided into 52 weeks of exactly 7 days each, forming an impeccable closed system of 364 cycles. This is not an observational error, it is the artificial rhythm of a megastructure. Even more astonishing are the calculations of lunar phases. Enoch describes in fractions how the moon's light waxes and wanes, indicating exact proportions of visible and hidden parts. He writes that the moon receives its light from the sun and details the mechanics of their interaction. Logos 7 analyzed these fractions half-full phase. The artificial intelligence reached an unequivocal conclusion. The probability that a man without optical instruments, telescopes, or any understanding of the sphericity of celestial bodies could independently derive such a precise mathematical model of lunar cycles and solar ecliptic is zero. The probability tends toward 1 in a billion. This knowledge was transmitted. It was imported from outside. But how exactly did Enoch end up where he could receive this information? Let us turn to the moment of his so-called ascension. In classical theology, it is described as a spiritual experience, the levitation of the soul. But we uploaded the description of this process into the physical modeling module of Logos 7. The text says, "The clouds called me, and the mist summoned me, and the path of the stars and lightning drove and pushed me, and the winds in the vision gave me wings and lifted me upward, and they raised me to the heavens." The Logos 7 system filtered out the poetry and built a model of physical flight in 3D format. What Enoch describes is a step-by-step overcoming of the layers of Earth's atmosphere. First come the clouds and mist, the troposphere, the lower layer where weather phenomena form. Then he describes the path of stars and lightning. From the perspective of an observer rapidly ascending, passage through the stratosphere and mesosphere would look exactly like that. He sees meteors burning in the upper layers, which he calls the path of stars, and rare high-altitude electrical discharges such as sprites, perceived by him as lightning. Next, the winds gave me wings. The system's analysis points to g-forces during acceleration, when pressure force presses the body, creating the physical sensation of a dense flow literally carrying the object. Enoch did not simply see a dream. He experienced a physical ascent, feeling gravitational overloads, pressure changes, and temperature shifts. Logos 7 calculated the approximate speed of this ascent based on the rate of change of visual markers described in the text. This was not the holy man's miraculous levitation. This was a ballistic or anti-gravitational trajectory of a transport shuttle delivering a passenger into orbit. Another irrefutable proof that the Book of Enoch contains real physical data is chapter 43. Enoch writes, "I saw the lightning and the stars of heaven, and I saw how he called them all by their names, and they were weighed on righteous scales according to the measure of their light. And I asked the angel, 'What is this?' And he said to me, 'These are their names, for they are weighed.'" Stop and think about these words. Stars were weighed on scales according to the measure of their light. We uploaded this specific verse into the astrophysics module of our system. Logos 7's answer was instantaneous and categorical. The text describes the dependence of a star's mass on its luminosity. This is a basic concept of modern astrophysics, the Hertzsprung-Russell diagram, discovered only at the beginning of the 20th century. The idea that a star's light is directly linked to its mass, that is, its weight, is absolutely impossible for the ancient world to understand. Ancient people considered stars simply holes in the heavenly vault through which divine light leaked, or little lamps. The very concept that a star has mass, that it can be weighed, and that this weight correlates with the intensity of its radiation, this is pure high-level science. Someone literally gave Enoch a lecture on stellar spectroscopy and gravitational mass, and he diligently recorded it all, using the only word available to him for measuring mass: scales. The Logos 7 system also noted the recurring motif in the text: strict accounting and classification. Enoch's guides constantly measure everything. They measure space, they measure time, they control the elements with precise measures. There is no room for random miracles in the text. Everything is subject to strict laws and protocols. The wind blows not because the gods willed it, but because certain portals open with certain pressure. This is not mystical chaos. It is an ordered, controlled technogenic or multidimensional environment. Protocol Apocrypha confirmed our main hypothesis. The Book of Enoch is not a religious fantasy. It is an encoded data package. It is the testimony of a man who was extracted from his familiar environment and taken through a series of artificial or higher spatial structures. He could not understand blueprints, but he remembered the shapes. He did not understand equations, but he recorded the numbers. What we now hold thanks to the primary processing by Logos 7 is a roadmap. We have proven that the observer was real, the flight was physical, the astronomical data unattainable for the technological level of that time. But this was only the introduction. Orbital mechanics and the heavenly luminaries are only the outer contour. The real secrets begin where familiar space ends and what Enoch called the layers of heaven begins. According to the data now being processed by Logos 7, the structure of these heavens is not clouds with angels playing harps. It is a colossal multilevel architecture. Quarantine zones, extreme temperature isolators, energy repositories, and the containment facility for beings that rebelled against their creators. We stand at the threshold of the first and second heaven, places the system has classified as the lower spheres. What is hidden in these enormous storages that Enoch called the prison for the rebellious stars? And what climate control technologies for Earth are concealed there? The data is already loaded. The system's answers will make you shudder. The investigation is only beginning. Imagine the primal terror of a being whose mind is accustomed only to the rhythms of nature, the changing seasons, and the slow movement of the sun across an endless desert, when that being is suddenly placed inside the colossal machine room of the universe. We are used to thinking of heaven as a place of ethereal peace where the souls of the righteous wander among transparent clouds, enjoying eternal serenity. But the Book of Enoch destroys this infantile illusion from its very first pages of spatial description. When Enoch overcomes the orbital barrier and enters the first level of this unreachable architecture, he does not see a paradise garden. He sees an industrial zone. He sees aggregates, cyclopean reservoirs, and control mechanisms whose scale defies human comprehension. To understand exactly what the ancient observer is describing, we launched a new stage of Protocol Apocrypha. We uploaded the fragments of text describing the first and second heaven into our analytical system Logos 7. We instructed the artificial intelligence to discard the mystical overlay and model the physical space based on the parameters Enoch recorded. The results of this synthesis force us to look at the concept of Earth's management from a completely different, terrifyingly technological angle. The first heaven, according to Logos 7's analysis, is nothing less than a global station for climate control and terraforming. Enoch writes, "I saw the storehouse of all the winds and how he arranged all creation with them. I saw the storehouse of hail and snow, the storehouses of the clouds and the dew." For an ancient herdsman, this is simply giant warehouses where God literally keeps snow in big sacks to pour it on the earth in winter. But for an artificial intelligence operating on the laws of thermodynamics and hydrodynamics, this text reads like the blueprint of an orbital geoengineering installation. Logos 7 analyzed the concept of wind storehouses. Winds are not stored in reservoirs. Wind is a difference in atmospheric pressure. The simulation conducted by the system shows that to control air flows on a planetary scale, this station must manage temperature gradients in the ionosphere and troposphere of Earth. Enoch describes gigantic gates from which different types of winds emerge, cold ones carrying drought or fertile rains. According to the physico-mathematical analysis of Logos 7, these gates are a metaphorical description of directed energy impact installations similar to modern ionosphere research projects, but exceeding them in power by millions of times. The emitters of the first heaven heat specific sections of Earth's atmosphere, artificially creating zones of high and low pressure, thereby forming jet streams and cyclones. Even more striking is the description of the storehouses of snow and hail. Enoch mentions that the angels control these elements so they do not destroy the earth. Logos 7 calculated that this refers to a highly complex system for managing the planet's albedo and water balance. Hail and snow are not simply precipitation. They are mechanisms for reflecting solar radiation and regulating global temperature. The artificial intelligence concluded that the first heaven is an automated dispatch center, a biospheric regulator that constantly balances Earth's climate, preventing it from sliding into an ice age or an irreversible greenhouse effect. What we call the whims of weather is, from the perspective of the first heaven, routine calibration of the life support systems of our planet. But if the first heaven is an engineering module, the second heaven hides something far more sinister. We move to the zone that Logos 7 classified as the sector of maximum isolation, the prison. Enoch writes that an angel carried him to a place where there was neither earthly nor heavenly structure. This place was engulfed in chaos. There he saw something that almost drove his mind to madness. "I saw their 7 stars of heaven bound together in it, like great mountains and burning with fire. When Enoch asks his guide why they are punished, the angel answers, "These are the stars that transgressed the command of the Lord, and he was angry with them and bound them until the time of the completion of their guilt." We uploaded this description into the quantum and plasma physics module of our system. What does it mean to bind a star? How can one shackle a fiery mountain in chains? Traditional theology claims that the stars are a metaphor for fallen angels, demons who rebelled against God. But Logos 7 does not operate with metaphors. The system analyzed the physics of containing extreme energies. The artificial intelligence's conclusion shocks with its scientific precision. Enoch describes plasma reactors or entities composed of high-energy plasma held by colossal magnetic fields. The magnetohydrodynamic simulation performed by Logos 7 fits the apocryphal text perfectly. Plasma heated to millions of degrees is burning fire. But how do you hold it so it does not destroy everything around it? In modern physics, tokamaks or stellarators are used for this, devices that create magnetic traps. Magnetic field lines encircle the plasma cord, preventing it from touching the reactor walls. For a man unfamiliar with electromagnetism, the invisible force lines that compress and hold a roaring fire would look exactly like invisible bonds, like heavy chains. Logos 7 emphasizes that the text directly states these stars are bound. This is the perfect technical description of the magnetic confinement process. But why does Enoch experience such animal, paralyzing horror in this place? He writes, "And I was terrified, and fear seized me." One could attribute this to the prophet's impressionability. However, the Logos 7 system has a different, purely biological explanation. We uploaded data on the effect of superstrong magnetic fields on the human central nervous system. Science knows that directed electromagnetic radiation of certain frequencies can directly affect the temporal lobes of the brain. This causes a person to feel an alien presence, inexplicable panic, spatial disorientation, and visual hallucinations. While near generators of monstrously powerful magnetic fields holding the 7 stars, Enoch's nervous system was subjected to the harshest radiation electromagnetic pressure. His terror was not only psychological, it was biochemical. The radiation literally burned the sense of safety out of his neurons. Who or what were these 7 stars? Logos 7 puts forward 2 hypotheses. The first, these are power elements, colossal megastructure reactors that went out of control, destabilized, and were emergency isolated in magnetic sarcophagi. Their sin was violating physical parameters, exceeding the permissible values of the safety protocol. The second hypothesis, even more alarming. According to the system's semantic analysis, the text endows these stars with consciousness. If that is the case, then Enoch saw beings of pure energy, plasma life forms possessing intelligence. They violated some fundamental law of the universe, for which the higher hierarchy isolated them in gravitational and magnetic wells. The second heaven is not hell for human souls, it is Guantanamo for cosmic entities of the highest order. Continuing through the second heaven, Enoch describes another zone he calls the wasteland or abyss. He says, "This is the place, the end of heaven and earth. It became a prison for the stars and the host of heaven, and pillars of fire slid in it, and I could not measure their size or their height." Analyzing this fragment, Logos 7 noted a spatial anomaly. Enoch clearly indicates that this place lacks both heavenly and earthly structure. The artificial intelligence classifies it as a description of a rupture in the fabric of spacetime, a local singularity, or an artificially created subspace pocket. The fact that Enoch could not measure the height and size of the pillars of fire speaks of a violation of familiar Euclidean geometry. In conditions of warped space, the human eye loses the ability to adequately assess perspective and scale. Objects appear simultaneously infinitely distant and oppressively close. The pillars of fire that slide are yet another marker of complex physics. The system defines them as relativistic jets, streams of plasma erupting at near-light speeds along the axis of rotation of massive objects. The fact that Enoch was able to observe this from inside and remain alive means he was behind some super-strong protective screen or force field. The administrators of heaven conducted him along observation galleries of this cosmic prison, demonstrating to him the power of the justice system operating at the level of astrophysical laws. Synthesizing the data on the first and second heaven, Logos 7 forms a clear picture of the lower spheres. We are dealing with technical tiers. This is the foundation of the entire structure. There is no worship here, There is no divine light for the sake of light itself. Here pumps hum, distributing atmospheric fronts across the planet Earth. Here roar the plasma entities shackled by magnetic fields, whose energy perhaps powers the entire cyclopean structure. Here reigns rigid, cold engineering maintaining order in the controlled sector of space. The first and second heaven are mechanisms of survival and containment, but Enoch does not stop there. His guides lead him further, raising him to the next level. And it is there that the Logos 7 system encounters its first irresolvable logical conflict. We are preparing to enter the third heaven, the place ancient texts call Eden, the paradise garden. But Logos 7's analysis reveals the deepest spatial paradox. According to the system's calculations, the third heaven contains within itself both a blooming biospheric dome with the tree of life and the most terrifying, soul-freezing hellish abyss where violators are tortured. How can paradise and hell exist in one plane? What exactly is the tree of life which the artificial intelligence defines as the central energy or genetic node? And why does the fragrance of this tree so closely resemble the description of a chemical anesthetic? We are loading this data into the system right now. What is found on the third heaven will destroy everything you knew about the origin of life. Are you ready to learn what is really hidden in Eden? The investigation continues. We are accustomed to thinking in absolute categories. In our cultural code, paradise and hell are two poles separated by infinity. Paradise is somewhere unimaginably high in the realm of eternal light, and hell is deep below, in the bowels of the scorching earth or at the very bottom of creation. This duality seems natural and unshakable to us. But when we initiated Protocol Eden and uploaded the data on the third heaven from the Book of Enoch into the Logos 7 system, the artificial intelligence produced a result that completely destroys this thousand-year-old dogma. The analysis revealed a spatial paradox that takes the breath away with its cold engineering pragmatism. On the third heaven, there are no infinite distances between light and darkness. According to the topological simulation performed by Logos 7, paradise and the hellish abyss are located in one plane. They are situated on the same level, in the same sector of the megastructure, separated only by colossal bulkheads of force fields or impenetrable barriers. Imagine the shock of an ancient man. Enoch ascends to the third heaven and first finds himself in its northern part. What he sees there makes him beg for mercy. He describes a place where utter darkness reigns, where unquenchable fire blazes at the same time as paralyzing, unbearable cold. He sees angels of punishment preparing instruments of torture, formidable and merciless beings whose faces express nothing but readiness to carry out the sentence. For a Bronze Age patriarch, this is unambiguously a place of posthumous torment, the abode of eternal suffering for sinners. But we instructed the Logos 7 system to conduct a physico-mathematical analysis of this description. The artificial intelligence completely ignored the emotional coloring of the text and focused on the thermodynamic paradox. How can fire and ice coexist in a closed space without neutralizing each other? The system's answer translates mysticism into the realm of high-tech engineering. Logos 7 classifies the northern sector of the third heaven as an industrial waste utilization zone combined with a cryogenic containment block. The coexistence of extremely high and extremely low temperatures is a basic principle of superconducting systems and thermonuclear reactors. The artificial intelligence suggests that the unquenchable fire consists of plasma incinerators, installations for destroying biological or technological waste, and possibly for matter annihilation. At the same time, the paralyzing cold consists of cryogenic cooling circuits using liquid nitrogen or helium to maintain reactor stability, or cryochambers for indefinite freezing of dangerous biological samples and hostile entities. And what about the angels of punishment with their instruments? The semantic analysis of Logos 7 indicates that Enoch is not describing living beings endowed with sadistic inclinations. He is describing automated drones, robotic security platforms, or maintenance personnel in heavy protective suits. What Enoch took for instruments of torture, according to the artificial intelligence, are tools for dismantling, manipulators for working with radioactive or biologically hazardous materials. The northern sector of the third heaven is not a torture chamber. It is a high-security waste processing plant and a strict quarantine block. Enoch simply could not interpret the industrial process except through the prism of pain and punishment. But the most astonishing thing happens next. The angel guides lead Enoch out of this industrial hell, move him to the south of the same third heaven, and before his eyes a completely different picture opens. He enters Eden, the paradise garden. Logos 7 modeled the transition between these zones. The system concluded that safe coexistence of a cryoplasma plant and a blooming biome requires isolation barriers hundreds of meters thick and independent life support systems. Why did the creators of this megastructure place them so close? The answer lies in the logistics of space stations. Waste from the biological sector is instantly utilized in the northern block, and the energy of the plasma furnaces powers the artificial light generators in the greenhouses of the southern block. This is a perfect closed-loop, waste-free ecosystem. The description of the southern sector of Eden itself strikes with its unnaturally perfect precision. Enoch sees a garden in which trees never lose their leaves, where fruits are always ripe, and the climate lacks any fluctuations. For a nomad accustomed to droughts and storms, this is a miracle of the Lord. For the Logos 7 system, this is a description of a hydroponic biosphere with artificial climate control. The artificial intelligence notes the absence of seasonal change, indicating an isolated dome with constant temperature, ideal humidity, and a strictly calibrated spectrum of lighting that stimulates continuous photosynthesis. Eden is not simply a park for the righteous to stroll in. It is a genetic data bank. It is a reservoir of flora created to preserve biological diversity or to conduct agronomic experiments outside Earth's surface. And in the very center of this southern sector, Enoch sees the main wonder, the object he calls the Tree of Life. He describes it so precisely that these lines became a gold mine for our system's analysis. Enoch writes that the tree has indescribable beauty. Its branches never wither, its fruits are like clusters of grapes or dates, and its trunk shines like gold and silver. But the most important detail that caught the artificial intelligence's attention is this: the fragrance of this tree penetrates into the very bones, and whoever tastes its fruit will never know disease or old age. We uploaded the biochemical vector of this description into the Logos 7 database. Ordinary smells are perceived by olfactory receptors in the nose and processed by the brain. A smell cannot physically penetrate bones. This is an anatomical absurdity. However, the system found a 100% match of this description with the effect of aerosol therapeutic preparations and penetrating nanotechnologies. The artificial intelligence made a startling conclusion. The Tree of Life is not a plant in the biological sense. The metallic sheen of the trunk, gold and silver. This is a description of a complex composite structure or alloys from which this central node is made. The fruits are capsules containing concentrated nutrient solution, synthetic proteins, or genetic code modulators. And that very fragrance penetrating the bones is an aerosolized biochemical agent, a kind of medical spray. Why does Enoch emphasize the bones? Logos 7 gives a clear medical answer. Bone marrow is the main organ of hematopoiesis. Stem cells responsible for regenerating the entire organism are produced there. A technology capable of delivering regenerative substances or nanobots directly to the bone marrow through the respiratory tract could instantly restore cellular damage, suppress diseases, and artificially stop the process of telomere shortening, which effectively means halting aging. The immortality granted by the Tree of Life is not a magical gift from God. It is the result of an ultramodern cellular therapy station. Enoch stood before the central bioreactor and stem cell dispenser, inhaling an aerosol that rewrote his DNA. Let us approach this question even more closely. Enoch mentions that no mortal being may approach the Tree of Life without direct permission. It is under the strictest guard. Why is the paradise tree so carefully protected? Theology will say so that sinful man does not taste eternal life. But the analysis of the Logos 7 system proposes a biosafety protocol. The central bioreactor is the most vulnerable and most important element of the entire station. Damage to this node, contamination of genetic material with foreign microorganisms, or unauthorized access to regeneration modules could lead to a planetary-scale catastrophe. Guarding the tree is simply a quarantine barrier. The cherubim with flaming swords often mentioned in related texts appear in the artificial intelligence's simulation as plasma automatic turret systems or perimeter laser scanners that instantly destroy any unauthorized biological object. Enoch also notes that near this tree stands an empty throne. He is told that this is the place where the great Lord himself descends when he visits the paradise garden. We ran this information through the architectural module of Logos 7. The artificial intelligence classified this throne as the command bridge, the terminal for controlling the biosphere. The fact that it stands empty most of the time indicates that the station operates in automatic mode. The highest-level administrator, whom Enoch calls God, visits this sector only for inspection, manual system calibration, or special experiments. The picture of the third heaven synthesized by Logos 7 stuns with its cold logic. Before us is a gigantic orbital module or multidimensional base. At one end of this module, plasma annihilation and cryogenic containment installations hum. At the other end, behind multimeter bulkheads, an artificially maintained biosphere blooms, in the center of which rises a bioreactor spraying regenerative nanoaerosols. And between these two extremes, along technological corridors, moves a shocked man from the Bronze Age accompanied by station administrators. Why was such a place created at all? Why was it necessary to combine a waste isolator with a genetic data bank and immortality laboratories? The system's analysis indicates that the third heaven was designed as an ark repository. This is a doomsday vault. Here are stored reference samples of flora and fauna, as well as technologies for restoring biological life in the event of a global catastrophe on the planet below. The hellish abyss of the north and the blooming paradise of the south are simply two tools in the hands of the engineers of life. One tool for destroying error, the other for creating the ideal. But if this repository was in such strict order, why are ancient texts full of stories of catastrophes, floods, and monsters? Why did the perfect plan fail? The answer to this question lies in the next stage of our investigation. The Logos 7 system has identified in the Book of Enoch text a critical error in security protocols. An incident that changed the course of human history. A group of operators, 200 station administrators whom Enoch calls watchers or guardians, voluntarily left their posts. They violated quarantine. They descended Mount Hermon and committed an act of unauthorized interference in the development of earthly civilization. They transmitted to humanity knowledge that was forbidden. But the most terrifying thing, they performed genetic modification of the human species, giving birth to something so horrifying that the creators had to activate the protocol of global cleanup. We move to the fourth vector of our investigation. We load into the system the data on the giants, the Nephilim, and the forbidden technologies of the Watchers. What the artificial intelligence discovered in the report on the fall of the angels will make you look at the myths of antiquity in a completely new way. Are you ready to learn the truth about the genetic hack of humanity? The Watcher's vector is activated. Until now, we have viewed the Book of Enoch as a detailed description of a gigantic orbital station or multidimensional construct in which every tier performs a strict engineering function. We analyzed the climate storehouses on the first heaven, the plasma isolators on the second, and the paradoxical biosphere of Eden on the third. This was a colossal, perfectly tuned machine. But any system, no matter how perfect, is vulnerable to one factor, the human factor, or in this case, the operator factor. We move to the darkest and most terrifying section of Enoch's archives, to the moment when the perfect mechanism suffered a catastrophic failure. We initiated the Watcher's vector. We uploaded into the artificial intelligence Logos 7 the fragments of text describing the so-called fall of the angels. Traditional theology presents this as an act of spiritual pride or banal lust of immortal beings for mortal women. But when you run these ancient lines through analytical algorithms focused on searching for technological patterns, a completely different picture unfolds before you. This is not a mystical fall. This is a detailed report on a large-scale violation of security protocols, unauthorized contact with natives, and illegal transfer of dual-use technologies. Moreover, Logos 7 classifies what happened as an act of unauthorized genetic modification of an entire species. According to the text, 200 angels from the Order of Watchers or Grigori, whose task, apparently, was monitoring the development of humanity from orbital or high-altitude posts, decide to violate quarantine. They descend to Earth, choosing Mount Hermon as their landing point. The artificial intelligence instantly highlighted this geographical reference. Mount Hermon lies at the intersection of the modern borders of Syria and Lebanon. The topography and radar coverage simulation performed by Logos 7 shows that this is an ideal point for placing a relay or temporary base. The dominant height provides control over a huge territory and stable communication with the orbital segment. The landing of 200 Watchers was not a chaotic drop. It was a clearly planned operation to establish a bridgehead on the surface. But what did they do next? The text states, "They took wives for themselves, and each chose one for himself, and they began to go into them and mix with them." Theologians see only lust here. However, Logos 7 analyzed this fragment from the standpoint of biology and genetics. If the Watchers were ethereal spirits, how could they enter into physical contact with biological beings? The system's answer is unequivocal. The Watchers possessed physical bodies compatible with human anatomy or used genetic technologies to create hybrid offspring. The artificial intelligence classifies this mixing not as a natural reproduction process but as a large-scale program of extracorporeal fertilization or direct intervention in the human genome. The Watchers used earthly women as surrogate mothers for breeding a new modified species. The result of this genetic hack was the Nephilim. Enoch describes them as giants whose height was unnaturally great and who began to devour all the works of men and then the men themselves. Logos 7 loaded these descriptions into the biomechanics module. The artificial intelligence concluded that the gigantism of the Nephilim was a side effect of uncontrolled expression of growth genes introduced by the Watchers. The biomechanical model shows that creatures of the size described in the text, 300 cubits, an obvious exaggeration by frightened eyewitnesses, but indicating anomalous dimensions, required a colossal amount of calories to maintain metabolism. Their aggression and cannibalism are not manifestations of demonic malice. From the standpoint of Logos 7, this is a banal, brutal ecological crisis. An artificially created apex predator with extreme metabolism rapidly exhausted the food base in its habitat and switched to consuming the only available protein resource, humanity. But the genetic experiments were only part of the catastrophe. The second part of the report, analyzed by the Logos 7 system, concerns the so-called secret knowledge that the Watchers transmitted to humanity. Enoch lists by name the leaders of the rebels and what they taught mankind. Azazel taught men to make swords, knives, shields, and breastplates, and also showed them the metals of the earth and the art of working them. Amaziras taught the resolving of spells, Barakiel observing the stars, Kokabel constellations, Tamiel astronomy. We asked the artificial intelligence to classify these secret knowledges. The result strikes with its logic. The Watchers violated the non-interference directive and handed a primitive civilization a package of technologies critically ahead of its natural development. Azazel transmitted metallurgy and composite alloy production technologies for weapons and armor. This was not simple blacksmithing. The text emphasizes the art of working, which Logos 7 interprets as knowledge of alloying and temperature regimes for hardening. Moreover, Azazel showed them antimony and the art of adorning the eyelids, as well as precious stones. The artificial intelligence defines this not as teaching cosmetics, but as the transfer of knowledge about the chemistry of rare earth metals and geological prospecting of crystals, possibly used as energy accumulators or optical elements. Samjaza and his group transmitted knowledge of root plants and the resolving of spells. Logos 7 translates this as training in pharmacology, toxicology, and possibly biochemistry of antidotes. Resolving spells in the terminology of ancient man means eliminating symptoms of poisoning or viral infections with chemical compounds. The astronomical knowledge transmitted by Kokabel and others the system classifies as the foundation of celestial mechanics, stellar navigation, and prediction of climatic cycles. For an agricultural society, this was a technology of strategic superiority, allowing precise calculation of sowing and harvesting times, as well as prediction of solar and lunar eclipses, granting unlimited power over fellow tribesmen. The analysis of Logos 7 shows that the transfer of these technologies was not an act of mercy. The Watchers were arming and training humanity, accelerating its technological evolution by thousands of times. Why? The artificial intelligence puts forward a disturbing hypothesis. The group of rebellious operators was preparing an army. They were creating hybrid supersoldiers, the Nephilim, and arming modified humans with steel weapons, teaching them strategy, chemistry, and navigation. They were turning Earth into a military camp, preparing for confrontation with the metropolis, with the very instance that controlled the heavenly megastructure. The metropolis's reaction was not long in coming. Enoch writes that the cry of the earth, devoured by giants and drowning in blood, reached heaven along with the war using the new weapons. For high administrators, Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel report the situation to Supreme Command. And here the text of the Book of Enoch turns into a liquidation protocol. We uploaded the orders given to these four entities into the tactical module of Logos 7. The artificial intelligence translated them from religious rhetoric into dry commands of a military operation. Raphael is ordered to bind Azazel hand and foot, cast him into darkness, and press him down with rough and sharp stones in the desert Dudiel so that he remains there until the day of the great judgment. when he will be cast into fire. Logos 7 classifies this as an order to detain the leader of the rebels, place him in a strict regime isolator using stasis or cryosleep technology in an underground bunker until subsequent transportation to a plasma incinerator, the very fire we already saw on the second heaven. Gabriel is ordered to destroy the Nephilim. The order sounds cruel. Set them against one another so that they destroy themselves in internecine war. The artificial intelligence defines this tactic as biological sabotage. The introduction of a virus or chemical agent causing uncontrolled aggression inside the hybrid population, leading to their self-destruction without direct intervention by metropolis forces. Michael is ordered to arrest Samjaza and the rest of the Watchers, watch the death of their children the Nephilim, and then bind the rebels under the hills of the earth for 70 generations. Logos 7 confirms. This is a protocol of mass arrest and deep isolation of the traitor operators in underground cryogenic prisons for a strictly defined period. But the most radical was the order given to Uriel. He was to warn Noah, son of Lamech, of the impending global catastrophe. Enoch writes, "The whole earth will be destroyed, and the water of the flood will be upon the whole earth and will destroy everything that is on it." We uploaded this fragment into the Logos 7 system for hydrodynamic analysis. The artificial intelligence's conclusion leaves no room for doubt. The metropolis made the decision for complete sterilization of the planet's surface. The transfer of forbidden technologies and uncontrolled genetic mutation had brought Earth's biosphere to a state beyond restoration.